Hello folks, my name is Chris, but you can call me Ganhu or Chris. It doesn't matter. This is the first installment in a series format that's never been done on the internet before. Don't pull up Karsten Runquist. Don't pull up his thumbnails. I'm calling this series What I Watched Month Year. I'm not a name or a title guy, so that's definitely subject to change. I want to make uploading a regular thing, even if that means doing more low-key, edit, non-intensive videos like this. Hopefully I can spice this up with some vlog-type footage from when I do go see these movies and when I do think ahead and get that footage. This video is like a little test guinea pig, of course, because I did not watch a lot of movies in June, unfortunately. So few movies, in fact, that 2 out of 4 of the movies I'm talking about I watched on May 30th. But just as a wise man once said, it's June o'clock somewhere. Mad Max Fury Road. Just a week or two before this, I saw Furiosa in theaters, and I loved the experience, so I knew it was finally time I had to sit down and watch Fury Road. A long overdue watch for sure, because I remember being on Twitter in high school hearing people talk about this movie like it was the action movie of the decade. And I don't think that's much of an exaggeration. Something that separates a film like Fury Road from the rest of its contemporaries in the genre is scale. George Miller does a great job of conveying scale in this film. When we see the Citadel for the first time or watch the War Boys chase Furiosa into this giant storm cloud, these moments not only make the subject feel miniature, but it also dwarfs the audience. Like, it gives me that sensation of, holy shit, I am so small compared to this giant stone mountain or that giant dust cloud. The visual effects also hold up surprisingly well, and they're from 2015. That's in stark contrast to Furiosa, but we'll talk about that when we get there. Charlize Theron was incredible as Furiosa. Is that how you say her name? Charlize Theron? Okay. Charlize Theron was incredible as Furiosa, even with my introduction to the character with Anya Taylor-Joy's performance. This coalesced pretty well with that impression. Something I like better about Theron's performance is how textured her sternness is. My girlfriend actually pointed out that she could very easily see a character like Furiosa, a high-ranking, trusted praetorian of Immortan Joe, who is the only woman given such stature in a male-dominated society, operating with ulterior motives, separate herself from the other wives or other the wives for their differences. Instead, she is so compassionate to the women she's escorting. I think it would be really easy to write a character like Furiosa as cold and harsh, or to have her distance herself from the harem members as frail and endangered, and she's the tough protector. But it really feels like they have a strong kinship. She treats them like she's their sisters. Nicholas Hoult as Warboy Nux was also a very surprising performance. It made me wonder why he's not in better goddamn movies. I mean, we're wasting this boy's talents on Fox X-Men movies and Aquafina comedies. Nux might have one of the best redemption arcs I've seen put to film. That might be a gross overstatement, but I attribute that to Holt's performance, as well as the fact that the next big notable franchise to feature a great actor who is a visually striking bad guy, where he had a redemption arc, was Star Wars with Kylo Ren. And we all know how that went. The one thing that stuck out with me was how much I wasn't really resonating with Tom Hardy as Max. And I don't think that was really Tom Hardy's fault. I think Max in this movie is in an awkward position. In any other movie, that'd probably be a bigger deal than what I'm making it out to be right now. He's not only the title character of the film, he's the title character of the entire goddamn series. I mean, you'd expect a character like that to hold a lot of weight, to be a little more gripping. While I do prefer Mel Gibson's take on Mad Max, and believe me, that is the only flowers I'm ever gonna give Mel Gibson, I think I understand why Hardy's Max doesn't really work for me. It's very clear that in this new era of Mad Max, Max is ironically not the focal point of the series. Miller and company want to explore the wasteland down under in a broader sense. They want to keep the spirit of the original Mad Max films about an apocalyptic society and showcase stories about empathy as they contrast with a violent, maniacal world. Seeing a character like Max who's experienced and learned so much through his exploits be so powerless feels like a little bit of a step backward. And for all intents and purposes, that's not really how you're supposed to engage with Fury Road. Although it was originally developed as a direct sequel to Beyond Thunderdome, as time went on, Fury Road was stuck in development hell, and there are plenty other videos and books written about the subject that you can explore on your own. But the bottom line is, somewhere along the way, it was decided that Fury Road was going to operate as an unspoken soft reboot to the Mad Max franchise, franchise, taking place in this weird limbo of canon, not canon to all the other Mad Max that preceded. And that's actually not a huge issue for me. Continuity is like the last thing I care about here in a series like Mad Max. And just having each installment read like a spoken word fable of the Road Warrior is actually pretty neat. This is a concept that's expanded upon in Furiosa almost to a literal degree, so it makes sense that Max is, no pun intended, a vehicle for the story of Fury Road, while still maintaining some semblance of agency as his internal conflict is mirrored in the struggle of Furiosa and the wives. Long overdue watch. I loved the movie, great action film, and only one Mad Max movie is better than it. 8 out of 10. Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga. This movie fucking rocks, dude. It rocks. I saw this movie in the middle of May and thought it was really good. I gave it like 4 out of 5 stars on Letterboxd. I watched Fury Road for the first time and then immediately saw Furiosa again. Now I want David Zaslav's fucking head on a pike. What do you mean this movie's release was the worst box office opening on Labor Day weekend in 30 years? What is the matter with you? George Miller is still alive and working on Mad Max films, and this is how you market it? Box office performance aside, Miller's only gotten better with age. Seeing the original Mad Max films followed by Fury Road and Furiosa, and similarly watching films like Taxi Driver or Casino or Goodfellas by Marty Scorsese, and then following those up with The Irishman and Killers of the Flower Moon, makes me think that turning 70 as a critically acclaimed director is like hitting Prestige and Call of Duty. It's like, yeah, you put in all this work and you reaped all these rewards. Now it's time to go beast mode again, motherfucker. Furiosa takes the implied tragedy and suffering of its title character from Fury Road and expands on this into a full Grecian-style epic with a visualization of the Green Place, her experience growing up in a brutal wasteland after being ripped from her home, and watching her experience tragic loss over and over again. I originally thought that Anya Taylor-Joy might have been a miscast for this movie, despite her being an excellent actress. That thought wasn't motivated by a lousy performance she gave in a movie. I don't think she's ever done that. I just thought she was maybe too big of a name to lead the film. Not to say that Tom Hardy or Charlize Theron aren't movie stars, but Anya Taylor-Joy and Chris Hemsworth definitely stand out a little more. Again, it wasn't that I thought she'd give a weak performance, I just thought I'd be seeing Anya Taylor-Joy, not Furiosa. I was glad to be proven wrong though, because both Taylor-Joy and Alila Brown, I think that's how you say her name, who plays a younger version of the character, were the heart and soul of this movie. I'm happy to admit how wrong I was. I don't think this movie would have worked with any other actress save for Charlize Theron. Anya's portrayal of a younger, angrier Furiosa, grieving her stolen youth by embracing the harshness of the wastes, recontextualizes Furiosa in Fury Road. This shot right here in Fury Road, I don't know how people felt about it in 2015. It hurts so much more after seeing Furiosa. And I'm just parroting what film Twitter has said at this point, but Chris Hemsworth gives one of the best, if not the absolute best performance of his career in this movie. I've seen folks compare his transformative performance to that of Heath Ledger's Joker, but Dementis' methodology of expanding his reign either through his charismatic showmanship or brutal outbursts of rage just to culminate in hasty power grabs that inevitably backfire on him remind me so much of Dutch from Red Dead Redemption 2. I wouldn't be surprised if Chris Hemsworth took a couple pages out of Benjamin Brian Davis's book, because the material definitely leans in that direction. And you guys know how I feel about Dutch. He's like my favorite villain in all of fiction. Something that these films do really well is the inclusion and characterization of tertiary characters like the Octobos, Scarabus Scrotus, and the History Man. Shit like that reminds me of Metal Gear Solid so much. Like, Octobos sounds like a name of one of the henchmen you have to fight on your way to Liquid Snake. Like, that sounds like a placeholder name for Psycho Mantis. It's no wonder that Hideo Kojima loved this goddamn movie, and I know he's not like the president of Japan or anything like that, but I do think him gassing the movie up on Twitter definitely played a role in the film's eventual performance in Japanese markets. That's probably not true. I'm going to choose to believe it. And of course, the actual filmmaking. The cinematography and editing of Furiosa is distinct. It is reminiscent of Fury Road, like I could tell it was the same creative team behind both movies, but I feel like Furiosa is a little bit more reserved. Fury Road's action sequences were frenetic. When the engine of a buggy roared and its chassis raced toward the camera, I felt like I was going to be hit by that car. I feel like a war boy taking a hit of one of those spray cans right before screaming, "Witness me!" Meanwhile, in Furiosa, I feel like like there's always a 10-foot pole that's separating the spectator from the spectacle, almost like a pole of inaccessibility. That's a reference to the movie. If you saw the movie, which many of you didn't, go watch it. We not only get to see more of the action in frame, but we get to see it for longer too. And I don't expect, nor do I want, movies post John Wick or the Daredevil Netflix series to adopt that style of the one-shot, no-cut action scene. In fact, I think that hurts a lot of movies. Extraction, just to name one, which is another franchise that headlines Chris Hemsworth. No, this gives me the impression that Miller is exercising patience with the action. In Fury Road, I feel like you're meant to be part of the action. You're meant to experience the brutality alongside Max, Furiosa, and the wives. Meanwhile, in Furiosa, it's a much more personal film. I think because of that, Furiosa is not playing like no hand in the story or anything like that, but I think especially in the earlier sequences, since she's a child and she's witnessing this violence, I think we need to have this impression of we are not in the violence, but we are witnessing it. So I think we need to be a little further removed from it. I think we have to have moments where there's an entire hijacking taking place in a wide shot, because we're not there yet. We aren't at the point where we are constantly engaging in the combat ourselves, and we get to that point in the movie, but especially in the beginning half, I feel like we have to be a little further away from the action, and I really appreciate that approach. This might be my movie of the year. It's up there with Dune Part 2, 9 out of 10. Hot Rod. This movie has been recommended to me so many times and has been hyped up for so long, especially during college. Lots of my friends really like the movie, and I thought it was just okay. I remember seeing a huge discrepancy between the audience score and the critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, and I remember thinking to myself, uh-oh, what happened here? What's going on there? I'm not one to abide by like a Rotten Tomatoes score. Like, that's not going to inform my opinion or shape how I'm gonna perceive the movie or anything like that. But it does tell an interesting story. Are the critics out of touch and they missed the mark on this one? Or a general audience is stupid like they always are? Weirdly enough, I don't think either was actually the case here. People who are diehard fans of all things Lonely Island will definitely have fun during this 90-minute romp through a silly premise, but if this is your first interaction with the comedy group, you'll probably chalk them up as stupid and annoying. The beginning and end to each scene and how long it feels like a joke needs to last or get played out for, it feels uncertain of itself. This was Akiva Schaffer's first feature film, and as funny as Schaffer and the rest of his Lonely Island collaborators are, being funny will only get you so far when you're directing a feature film versus a 5-minute comedy sketch. Amateur direction can sometimes endear a film like Napoleon Dynamite, given the content and the signature awkwardness of that script. But in a film like Hot Rod, that skill feels a little more naked. More funding, bigger names, and more technical experience under the belt of everyone involved. It should put a veneer of competency over the film, but the moment-to-moment pacing shines a light on the problem, and this movie definitely suffers because of it. I say all that, but let's address the elephant in the room. It's Lonely Island. Of course it's funny. Just like any comedy, not every joke lands, and that's definitely not helped from the pacing issue I mentioned earlier, but this film has two of the funniest visual comedy gags I've seen in a movie in a while. Given the fact that they're visual and their efficacy might hinge on the surprise factor a little bit, I can't actually talk about those scenes at length, which sucks because those are like the highlights of the movie. One of those scenes is iconic. It might be the scene from this movie that everyone remembers. If you go to YouTube and you type in Hot Rod, the next words are probably falling down. And if you don't know what I mean by that, she knows. If you don't know what I mean by that, don't spoil it for yourself. I would go and watch the movie right now. It's pretty early on in the movie, and just let it roll over you. Just let it hit you. The other scene that I actually don't see talked about that often is closer to the end of the film. There's like this really hopeful rallying moment that the main characters experience, and then suddenly like a riot breaks out of nowhere. And the riot itself is hilarious, but when that is resolved, Andy Samberg's delivery of the line, "What the hell?" golden. It makes the entire movie. Like, it, no joke, saves this from being a 4 out of 10 and makes it a 5 out of 10. Lonely Island could only go up from here in terms of creativity, and they definitely prove that with movies like Popstar, Never Stop, Never Stopping. Maybe start with Hot Rod and then move on to Popstar if you don't want Hot Rod to let you down, or maybe flame the fuck out of me in the comments for taking Hot Rod too seriously. I don't know, 5 out of 10. You heard me say it already. The Fall Guy. Both Hot Rod and The Fall Guy surprised me, but like in opposite ways. While I had high hopes for Hot Rod being a blowout comedy, I was already familiar with David Leitch's filmography, and I was not hopeful for his latest action comedy. I assumed Fall Guy was going to be another installment in the Reddit movie cinematic universe, but I was surprised with how engaging this movie ended up being. While I felt like his last film, Bullet Train, was more focused on eye-popping production design and atypical fight sequences, informed by the reluctant action hero, that movie sacrifices interesting characterization for one-dimensional cartoon characters to get there. This movie almost has like the exact opposite issue. And real quick, I need to highlight something that I was nervous about walking into The Fall Guy because it's an issue that plagues its contemporaries. You know how modern for grown-up type comedies nowadays have this just atrocious style of dialogue writing, where it sounds like all the characters mustered up the courage to swear for the first time like they're 11 years old. This style of writing where every character has to combine 2 or more curse words together like they're trying to out-obscenity the angry video game nerd. Shitballs style writing is what I like to call this trend. In fact, that phrase, I'm sure, has been uttered a couple of times in these types of movies. The Deadpool movies were and still are horribly guilty of that. I haven't seen Deadpool and Wolverine yet. I guarantee you it's going to be an issue in that one. That trope killed all of my enjoyment for Bullet Train. It feels like it's an endemic in current writing conventions. Even in movies I like Glass Onion even. They insist on featuring this style of dialogue writing. Like, guys, can we please knock this off? Can we please stop? Tangent aside, I'm happy to report that this movie didn't feature dialogue like that, and if it ever did, it wasn't enough for me to notice because I feel like I'm pretty sensitive to that type of writing. And I don't know if that's to Leitch's credit, or maybe he has a stronger writing team this time around, or maybe they just have different priorities for what they want to see accomplished in a story. I feel like it might be the latter because I wasn't expecting the romance between Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt's character to really affect me the way that it did. From what I saw in the promotional material leading up to the movie's release, I figured this movie was incorporating this will they won't they subplot purely to pad the movie out, but this felt a little more fleshed out than that. Because we see Jodie putting her all into the development of the in-movie film, as well as her initial animosity toward Cole that didn't really feel out of left field either, I think that solidified this idea that their romance wasn't inevitable, and I think that's actually a really important factor for when you're including stuff like this, because if I can tell they're going to end up at the end of the movie anyway, it makes me think, all right, well, why am I watching, you know? The third act is where the story gets pretty convoluted because as the mystery is unraveling, of course, there's a bunch of seemingly unrelated threads that start to reveal themselves as being interwoven. And while other movies do that really well, I feel like in a movie where you're doing so much, you don't also need like a murder mystery shoved in there too. Like I said, the writing is the stronger aspect of the film, but it's not perfect. In fact, the whole premise of the movie, not like the script, the actual project of The Fall Guy as a film is oddly the weakest element. The stunt work was excellent, and given the content of the film and Leitch's background, it's no wonder why. But for some reason, most of the more elaborate action sequences feature distractingly shoddy CGI work. The one hallmark of a typical David Leitch movie, the action, what this movie is almost textually writing a love letter to, is completely underwhelming because it looks fake as hell. The credits of this movie are intercut with behind-the-scenes production footage of the stunt work being filmed, basically pulling back the curtain to the audience just moments after the film concludes to proudly show how they filmed these stunts practically and on location. But the final product looks like it was filmed on a soundstage covered head to toe in green screen. This movie's just so weird. I was totally expecting to hate it, and I didn't really sing its praises much either, but every trailer made this film seem like it was going to be one of those by-the-numbers David Leitch movies. I was really surprised to see that that wasn't the case. I had an alright time. I think it's worth a watch. give it a 6 out of 10. Thank you for watching what I watched June 2024. Hopefully I will get July's out before midway through the month of August. Hopefully come August 2nd, maybe even 3rd, I'll have it ready for you. But I already watched more movies in July than I've seen in June, so we'll see how that shakes out. So yeah, I got stuff I have in my watch list on Letterboxd, and if you wanna recommend a movie or two for me, drop them in the comments. Feel free to like and subscribe. Appreciate you guys being here. I'll see you in the next one.